Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Thursday, March 27th. It is opening day in baseball, but not just that. It is also a big day in the NBA after LeBron James went on Pat McAfee Show and had a lot to say about a lot of different things. We'll get into that. We'll get into our power rankings in the NBA, which I know are a day late. We'll kick off our first season MLB power rankings for baseball, as well as getting into a preview of March Madness, which starts a little bit before our show aired today. But before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday, March 27th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our first segment here. That has to do with LeBron James. LeBron James went on to Pat McAfee's show yesterday for an hour-long interview, the kind of thing that he doesn't do that often. And this was pretty clearly, at least in my mind, a direct shot at Stephen A. Smith. Now, for those who are not paying attention, this is a little bit more off the court than I generally like to cover, but this still is a major story. You got LeBron James, and you've got one of the faces of sports media going at it in Stephen A. Smith. LeBron got in Stephen A. Smith's face a couple weeks ago, probably actually about a week ago at this point, and basically said, hey, stop talking about my son like that. Then Stephen A. Smith went on his show, addressed it, said some things along the lines of, I didn't want to address it, but the video came out and I had to address it. They've been talking a lot recently, but a lot of this does center around LeBron's son, Bronny James. Bronny James was, of course, the 55th overall pick in this year's NBA draft. He's developed really nicely as the season goes on. His first couple games, appearances in the NBA, they weren't great. There's no sugarcoating that. It wasn't a great debut for Bronny James, but it's hard to have that kind of debut. Of course, Bronny James went through his heart condition right before his freshman year of college. He had to step away from the sport of basketball, and that kind of made it a little hard to get back on the court. That and the fact that he is under such scrutiny because he's the son of the greatest basketball player to ever play basketball in LeBron James, right? I'm not here to get into that argument of him versus MJ, but he's at least, minimum, the second best basketball player to ever play the game, and he's still playing. So you have a massive, massive spotlight, and shout out to Bronny James. He has done an incredible job dealing with the pressure, and of course he grew up around it, so I'm sure he's a little bit more used to it. But the fact of the matter is that the hate that's been thrown in his direction is something that has always irked me the wrong way. Not sure if I've addressed it on the show, but I know I've talked to people in private about this. The way that they cover Bronny James really makes me angry. Bronny James should not be getting the coverage he gets. Every time he touches the ball, I see 10 TikTok videos about Bronny James being the MVP. He was in Washington, and he played a pretty solid game. He was getting MVP chants, but they weren't like, oh my God, this kid is great MVP chants. They were sarcastic. And it rubs me the wrong way. This is a kid that if his last name wasn't James, wouldn't even crack the national media attention, right? He's a really good G League all-star player, but every time he touches the ball, you get 30 hate posts directed towards him, 40 sarcastic posts about how he's the greatest of all time, and it really rubs me the wrong way. We need to let this kid develop. We need to let Bronny James become the player he's going to become, because despite all this pressure that he's done, he, like I said, has developed into a really solid role player. You're talking about a guy that dropped 17 points in the NBA the other night, a guy that's dropped nearly 40 points in the G League, a guy that legitimately is a G League all-star player. He's one of the top picks in the G League. And this, for a 55th overall pick, for anybody else, would be considered a success, and it should be considered a success. He's still a rookie. He has proven that he belongs on an NBA roster. Maybe he's not a starter, but that's fine. He doesn't have to be a starter. Just the fact that he proved that he is worth being on a roster on a solid role player makes that like a top 5% outcome for especially a 55th overall pick and a late second round pick. And that there is no reason that he gets all the hate he does. And a lot of the drama that stirred up between LeBron James and Stephen A. Smith is because of Bronny James. So let's get that out of the way. Let the kid be himself. Let him develop. Don't put a microscope over everything he does, because he doesn't need that. It's not a great environment for him to develop and become his best self in, but he's done a very admirable job dealing with it, and I'm very impressed by how he's able to do that. The other major pieces that kind of came out of this interview with LeBron James and Pat McAfee is the fact that he kind of mentioned the previous eras, right? He said Giannis could probably drop 250 in the 70s. He said Bronny would be arrested for some of the moves he does on the court in the 70s, right? And they're not necessarily wrong, right? But that's what happens. We see all the time, and this kind of goes into the bigger picture of the fact of where we're at with basketball media right now. And it's one of these things that I think is hurting the sport the most, is the way that the media covers basketball, especially the old heads. We see Shaq and Chuck on TNT, especially. Those two are some of the biggest offenders of this. Shaq more than anybody else really goes on and just kind of trash talks the younger generation. You have guys that, big guys. He's like, they're out there shooting the three. Back in my day, they'd go down in the paint, but they have different skill sets now. And what they're not able to address is the good that's coming in this era. And I think that's why there's so much negativity around basketball media, around LeBron James, around Bronny James, around this whole conflict between Stephen A. Smith and LeBron James as a whole. Is the whole state of the NBA media especially. You don't see this kind of thing in the NFL. Now, of course, they're going to butt heads. There's going to be some negativity because the media has to call people out, but it's not the same thing where you have former players being like, these guys suck. They could never survive when I was playing basketball. All the NFL guys are saying, I could never survive right now. What they're doing now is crazy. Now, of course, you have the odd guy that's like, the penalties are a little softer now, but the pure athleticism that continues to go, and this is for every sport, for everything, not just sports, but in life, people are gonna get better at a thing the longer that it exists, right? It's just like you. If you've discovered football, you weren't the best in your life at football when you first started. And as you develop, people are going to learn from you. As you learn, you're going to teach other people so they don't have the hardships that you did. And it's going to be a cycle of people getting better and better and better and better. So we're going to continually see the growth of all of these leagues. But the fact that the NBA has this super negative connotation surrounding the guys that are playing now versus the guys that are playing in the past really hurts the sport, and it hurts the way that they interact with each other. Now, I thought it was kind of harmless. He obviously doesn't think that Giannis would drop 250 points in a basketball game. That's ridiculous. Nobody is ever going to drop 250 points in a basketball game. Giannis could go out there and dominate. He could go out there and be the best player of all time if he was transported back to the 70s. There is no doubt in my mind about that. But he would not drop 250 points. It's just not a thing he would do. At the end of the day, this whole thing kind of got blown out of proportion. It's going to happen when you have one of the biggest sports figures in LeBron James and one of the biggest sports media figures in Stephen A. Smith going at each other. But this is something that I think kind of puts a mirror on where we stand with the entirety of basketball media more than anything. And I think that's something that is not easy to fix, but something that as we see this, and I think this is going to be really important as we head to the future of especially basketball media, but sports media as a whole, this is going to hold a mirror up to it and say, why is this the thing that is the front story? Why is this our leading story? Why can't we just talk about, the amazing things that people are doing as opposed to only focusing on the negatives? We'll see how this affects things, but I do think that this might cause a major shift in the way that we cover sports, especially now that there continues to be more factions between the old traditional media with ESPN and your cable stuff and your new media. Pat McAfee is the head of that, really, with him running the internet show and having it licensed out to ESPN, not having an ESPN show. It's a little different, and I think this is one of the first big steps in seeing that divide that's continuing to get further and further from the new media and the old media, and I'm really curious to see where this goes. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you think about LeBron James's interview? What did you think about the stuff they said? What do you think about this situation as a whole? I'm really curious about your thoughts. Let me know in the comments. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to what else? More basketball. The Sweet 16 has already kicked off. The first couple games have started. We're going to go over each and every single one from today, preview them, talk about who I think is going to win, and how I think those games will go. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.